Whether it's hanging half 100 on them at Owen Field or the run rules on the diamond at Lowe's Field, we're giving you the breakdowns, the bets, and the hot takes from the perspective of two former OU Athletics employees. You're listening to the Mainline Podcast with Tyler Burton and Adam Jacquez.
Let's go! Let's go! Go!
Let's go. It's the Mainline Podcast. He's Tyler Burton. I'm Adam Jacquez. Tyler, I like the hat tip there during your name introduction there for those of you watching us on YouTube and now X, or Twitter as I will continue to call it. But thank you everyone for joining us this evening for this episode of the Mainline. We are a Red Dirt Media show. Tyler, we've got a lot to cover today. We got transfer portal. We'll be talking about guys both already committed to OU as well as maybe some names that could be coming to Norman soon. And, of course, we'll talk some basketball as the Big 12 swing of conference games has started. OU gets off to a pretty hot start there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always kind of a sad and gloomy day, the day after the first season of officially the college football offseason, ultimately with the regular season and postseason coming into an end last night. Michigan knocks off Washington to win the national championship. And, you know, Adam, long ago were the days where once the offseason got into effect, once the national championship was over, there was a little bit of downtime going into spring football. But now with the transfer portal being what it is, recruiting being what it is, NIL being such a huge focal point, being part of it, there's really no such thing as offseason in the world of college football. So we're going to touch on things with regards to OU. There are some different updates within the portal, some different guys that Oklahoma is kind of feels like they're on the edge of the doorstep here. They're trying to get over the finish line, trying to lock up a couple of these guys. We'll see ultimately if they can get it done. And, you know, Adam, it's basketball season. This is a top 10 basketball team inside the Lloyd Noble Center that Porter Mosier's got cooking right now. And boy, do they have a couple of really tough road games coming up this weekend, starting tomorrow night in Fort Worth. So we're going to touch on that as well. But yeah, man, it's freezing cold up here in Denver right now. Wind chill this morning was -2. That's why I got a couple of layers on right now. It's freezing cold, but things are good, man. Excited to talk some football, some OU basketball, and again, welcome everybody to tonight's show.
Absolutely. I was telling my buddy over at church the other day that this time of year feels like you're getting a half serving of football. The NFL, the playoffs, they're interesting, they're fun. We all like the Super Bowl, but it's not college football. So it just can't fully satisfy the hunger that I have. So let's hope these next 8 months go really fast. And some of the things you alluded to there on the portal really help keep our attention around OU football this time of year, which is always fun. And we'll be talking baseball and softball here in just a couple weeks. We've got some things up our sleeves there. Tyler, I don't know if I've told you this yet, but the hype video for softball, it is complete. It's taking everything I have in me not to just release that right now, throw it on the live stream, or put it somewhere on Twitter or wherever to show off, because I think it is our best work that we've ever done from a hype video perspective. So I'm pumped to show that, and hopefully we'll have a little bit of a softball preview, look ahead here in the coming weeks that we'll release that on, so stay tuned for that. Let's talk portal, though, around OU football here. And let's start with kind of the name that everyone's talking about right now, Zaylence Hurd, or Lance Hurd, as a lot of people will mention him, the former 5-star recruit that went to LSU, kind of fell behind some other guys that were really talented on the offensive line, finds himself in the portal, heads to Tennessee, makes it out of Knoxville without committing to the Vols, and then shows up in Norman over the weekend, spends a lot of time at OU, seems like things went well, still no commitment as it stands that we do this live show on Tuesday evening, though.
Yeah, and that's kind of the scary thing. The further that you get removed from that visit that Lance Hurd had in Norman, spending a couple of days with Bill Beanbo over the weekend. Yeah, it's definitely the crown jewel, as you labeled it in the itinerary, Adam. 6'5", 300-pound left tackle out of LSU. He was a top 15 player in the class of 2023. You know, one of the crown jewels of this cycle's portal class. And this is a massive recruitment for Oklahoma going into 2024. You lose your starting tackles in Walter Rouse and Tyler Guyton, both to the NFL. I know Spencer Brown has a lot of potential coming over from East Lansing. Jacob Sexton, came on strong towards the back half of the year. And if you're Seth Luttrell going into next season with Jackson Arnold, having a firm grasp of that starting, QB1 position in Norman, protecting Jackson's blind side is by far and away a top priority for this football team going into next season. And from everything that we've heard, Bill Bedenbaugh has done everything. He has thrown everything but the kitchen sink into this recruitment, trying to land Lance Hurd. They're playing the NIL game. They're preaching the opportunity to come in and start day one. They're selling Bill's track record with developing guys, not just into draft picks, Adam, but starters in the NFL that go on to have long, successful, wealthy careers. And I know that they're competing with other programs like the likes of Tennessee or an Ole Miss, who's coming into the fold. That's a program that, when you talk about the impact that the transfer portal can have on your roster and flipping it from one season to the next, Texas A&M has been one that's been heavily involved, but, Ole Miss is one with what they're doing the last, month or so in the transfer portal. Some of the guys that they brought in on both sides of the football, this is just another one where is Oklahoma, yes, they are playing the NIL game, but is it essentially going to be, we're getting left at the altar once again, just because we simply, priorities might be different than developments. Maybe some guys are prioritizing, collecting a bag a little bit more so than actually playing football. That remains to be seen. We're not going to label that for this kid or anybody else.
We're not far off, though, from like this kind of turning into a little bit of a meme recruitment, because the transfer portal, everything cycles a little bit faster in the terms of like visits and what they're asking for in those NIL conversations. It's almost there for me in the sense that like he hasn't made a decision between Tennessee or OU, and maybe there is a visit upcoming to Ole Miss, and this is a guy that is a former 5-star, so there probably is an element of a guy that says, hey, I deserve the 5-star treatment, which maybe he's worth it.
Well, Adam, in today's day and age of college football, with recruiting kind of taking the turn that it is right now, with NIL, with getting paid being such a huge part of it, I don't think that any of us can really sit here and honestly say that we wouldn't at least entertain the thought. I mean, especially some of these kids that are, anywhere from 17 to 20, 21, 22 years old that are having, hundreds of thousands of dollars thrown their way. So, I mean, if you're a kid, with a family or a potential family one day, why wouldn't you at least field some of those offers? But that just kind of goes back to, Oklahoma building the program that they are right now, the trajectory, what Brent Venables likes to, base his football program on from a culture standpoint, a foundation standpoint, being a program based off, relationships and not being transactional 100% of the time. It kind of feels like, yes, that does resonate. And that's what, allows guys like Billy Bowman and Danny Stutchman, Dejon Terry, to come back because they love what's being, done day in and day out inside the Switzer Center in Oklahoma. But how does that play in today's era of recruiting with NIL being such a huge part of the game? So again, it remains to be seen, but make no mistake about it. The further that this gets away from Lance Hurt's time in Norman, you almost kind of have to wonder, okay, is he pretty much, does he have his mind made up, or is he going to maybe take one more visit to Oxford, here over the next couple of days? Or is he basically, he knows that he's, one of the best players in the portal right now. Left tackle is one of the, premium positions on your football team. And he knows that a lot of schools are going to be vying for his services. So why wouldn't you wait a little bit longer to see if maybe another offer comes in, or maybe you can up the ante a little bit on how much money you could possibly collect? I don't know. There's a lot of things going on behind the scenes, and we'll see how this thing plays out. We just hope that it's in Oklahoma's favor.
If OU can get him, that would be a really solid trio of options there at the tackle position between Jacob Sexton, Spencer Brown, the Michigan State transfer, and then Lance Hurd, the LSU former 5-star. So some interesting options there, and not to mention a guy like Logan Howland maybe, who develops over the offseason and maybe starts to compete for one of those roles there. On the interior, you've got Terrence Ferguson, who recently visited from Alabama, formerly a 4-star recruit, a top 100 recruit that was at Alabama for a few seasons, played a little bit, didn't really start a ton, but was certainly a piece that they had there. So another former top recruit there that potentially could add more depth into that interior line, along with some of the guys that OU's already gotten in, Fabici Nwewu, the North Texas former second-team freshman All-American, I should mention, out of Denton there. So you're building some depth there, and potentially you could add Terrence Ferguson to that group as well.
Yeah, and I think, for Oklahoma fans that have watched SEC football for the better part of the last decade, and any college football fan that has watched the playoffs over the last couple of weeks. If they watched the national championship last night, they saw Michigan's dominance on both the offense and defensive line. Along the line of scrimmage, make no mistake about it. You can have the 5-star quarterbacks, you can have the flashy wide receivers, you can have all the playmakers at your disposal. But at the end of the day, football's football. And, the team that's more physical, the team that can, win at the point of attack, that can control the line of scrimmage, 9 times out of 10, that's the team that's going to have the advantage and basically the upper hand to win these football games. And that's the type of roster, that's the brand of football that Oklahoma needs to, continue to rise to, continue to elevate to that standard that we're seeing, with some of the elite teams like Michigan and Alabama and Georgia and even Texas this year as well. And what was their best team, probably within the last 15 years. They still, couldn't win a college football playoff game. They couldn't beat Washington with their best team in 15 years. So, but make no mistake about it, you always want to be able to bring in more depth within the line of scrimmage, particularly on the interior. So if you're able to bring in a guy like Terrence Ferguson to go along with what we've already got in the boat from this transfer portal class and some of the guys that have been on campus now for, multiple seasons right now, you can never have too much talent. You can never have too much depth. And you just hope that, Bill Beanball, along with Jerry Schmidt over the course of the next 8 months, they can continue to get these guys to play at a higher level, continue to develop them, both mentally, but also physically, putting on some strength and size. Because with where Oklahoma's going, you got to be able to hold up over a 15-game season, hopefully longer than that, with the 12-team playoff coming into effect for Oklahoma to get back to, what we've grown accustomed to being an Oklahoma fan and seeing this program do for the better part of a century, and that's winning and competing for championships.
On the other side of the ball, you mentioned line play being so important. We saw Michigan really develop a ton of guys that were able to rush the passer. They gave Jalen Milroe all sorts of problems. They gave Michael Penix a lot of problems that he hadn't experienced throughout the year, and that turned out to be a big difference maker last night in the national championship game. So Let's talk about Caden Woolard, a guy that comes from Miami of Ohio, from the Redhawks, a guy that had, I think, 9.5 sacks this past season. Miami, a very good defense, very, very solid defense in the MAC there. So they play a high brand of football there. Now he goes up a level to Oklahoma. We've seen mixed results from guys going from G5 to Power 5. Sometimes they're not ready for it. Sometimes it's Jared Verse. And the dude was always ready for it, just maybe was overlooked in recruiting or developed late or any number of reasons. But then they get to that big boy school and they're just as good there and make an even bigger impact. What's your forecast for a guy like Caden Woolard, though? Do you see him playing? What type of role do you see him playing?
You look at this kid's stat line, what he did over the course of his career at Miami of Ohio, and, you just look at the most recent example, 2023. He had 9.5 sacks for the Redhawks this year. My expectations are pretty medium right now with this kid. Obviously, you go from the MAC to the SEC. He's got a huge adjustment coming in playing against that level of competition. But I think if Caden can come in, and again, right now he's listed about 6'5", 250 to 255 pounds. I think if Caden can come in, give us the same or maybe even surpass the level of production that we got from a guy like Rondell Bothroyd, who was kind of a one-year rental from Wake Forest. He declared for the NFL draft, within the last 24 hours. Then I think that this could be a win-win for Oklahoma and this kid. He's got some work to do this offseason, obviously, getting stronger. They're probably going to want him to put on a few more pounds, maybe 5 to 10 more pounds, continue to get stronger. Learning Brent's defense is going to take some time to do, but Miguel Chavis was thrilled to get this guy out of the transfer portal, and I think that they see a tremendous upside in Caden, and we'll see what he can do in the Crimson and Cream as this thing kicks off here in less than 300 days.
I think at the very least, he's someone there that potentially could be a little bit stronger, a little bit bigger than some of the younger defensive ends in that room, and maybe could help elevate their play or at worst be a mentor of saying hey, here's how I've been this successful so far in college, and here's how you can follow those footsteps. Now, we hope for the best for Caden, and we want him to be able to say, hey, here's my role. I'm going to come in and maybe take someone's job or just have a great year and propel himself into an NFL career, because that would be pretty awesome and really help this defense.
Yeah, but on the flip side of that, Adam, let's be realistic. Let's look at what Oklahoma currently has, in that, defensive end room with Miguel Chavis. You're talking about guys like R. Mason Thomas, who's going to be a veteran going into his third season in Oklahoma, PJ Adebawore, Ethan Downs coming back for another year. This guy, we know that, he's going to come in. He's going to work Danny Okoye. He's going to come in. He's going to bust his ass. Nigel Smith, another one as well. this guy's going to come in, and you ultimately think that your best hope when you bring in guys from the transfer portal, they're guys that are going to be able to come in and at least find their way onto the field. They can be guys that can come in and make an impact. They may not be starters, but they can find their way into the rotation. They can get, 10, 15, 20 snaps a game. And I think, Adam, taking a step back and looking at this roster, particularly that position group, if Oklahoma takes that next step at the defensive end position going into 2024, where you've got PJ, you've got Ethan Downs, you've got RMT, I hate to say it, but if those guys play up to the level that we expect them to, I don't know if you're going to be able to see Caden Woolard be able to have that type of production. But on the flip side of it, I think that means that's great news for Oklahoma, because it means that those guys that are already on campus, it means that they've taken that next step. They're playing up to that level that they were, one of the reasons why they were so highly sought after, coming into this program.
I agree with you on all counts there. I want to look at that room and go, yeah, he's not going to play over Okoye because he's a beast. He's not going to play over PJ Adebaware because that guy's a beast. And Ethan Downs is a solid player. I'd like to be able to agree with you and say, like, yeah, I think that's for sure. Like, we've got dudes in our room that have been homegrown, recruited, and so forth. And it may be tough for them. But at the same time, I look at the past success here. Ethan Downs led the team in sacks last year, not just for defensive ends, but for all positions at 4.5. Caden Woolard more than doubled that with his time at Miami this past season. So there's definitely room. Like, no one's really seized, hey, this is my starting role and no one else can take that. It's very much up for grabs. So I'd like to think that, hey, there's some young guys in that room that really blossom in the spring and summer and become, All-American type candidates. We talked about this a lot last week with PJ of how, we probably had some unfair expectations for him in year one, and we think maybe he could take that bigger leap in year two as he becomes more accustomed just to playing the sport of football, and especially at the college level. But there's obviously there's room along that entire defensive line for someone to come in and seize an opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, look no further than David Stone and Jaden Jackson, a couple of guys that are going to come in as true freshmen, class of 2024, and I think that they're going to have every chance possible to come in and compete for some of those snaps that we'll see this upcoming fall. But Adam, let's transition over to the other side of the football in here. Let's talk some tight end. Obviously, Oklahoma got the commitment yesterday from the Baylor transfer, Oklahoma native Jake Roberts. He's going to be coming to Oklahoma, what's going to be his third school over the course of his collegiate career. Adam, what do we think about this pickup, and what are some of your early impressions on of who we could see lead the tight end room going into 2024?
I think it's really tough to project that because Jake Roberts was a guy on a very bad team in Baylor, had inconsistent quarterback play. You were swapping between Blake Shapen and the backup because of injuries throughout the season. So it's really hard to measure, I think, his impact for the Bears. I think he kind of came on late in the season, and there was a lot of consistency where he was doing over 30 yards a game, which is respectable from the tight end position. So I think he's a steadying presence. He's someone that Seth Luttrell is obviously very familiar with because he transferred from North Texas to Baylor. Now he's reuniting with Seth Luttrell in Norman. Obviously, his brother's a big, probably the best tight end in the 2025 class, playing just down the road at Washington. I don't think there's a scenario where the brothers could play together on OU, but obviously, he's probably going to be at all the OU games that he's, can get to outside of his official visits now because his brother's playing on Owen Field. So, obviously, a win from that recruiting perspective alone of building more relationship there and everything. So, Jake Roberts, interesting piece there. You've also got Blake Bauer, the transfer out of Southeast Louisiana. I affectionately call them the Mud Dogs. They're not actually the Mud Dogs, but I'm pretty sure he played with the Water Boy anyway. But Bauer's kind of an interesting prospect there in that, I don't really know, what are we going to get? I feel like it's either going to be really good because he's a freaky athlete that's just, figuring out how to play tight end, or we see that go the opposite way, too, of, he's going up a level. Oh, he's not used to playing tight end. Oh, he's just an athlete, which is good. So, I feel like we have a wide range of possibilities there. And then you throw in Davin Mitchell, who, true freshman, highly ranked. But, we've talked about the freshman on the show before, so we'll see.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of variation, and you've got a lot of choices, a few different skill sets that Joe John Finley and Seth Luttrell are going to have the opportunity to kind of tweak and play around with a little bit. Obviously, in Jake Roberts, you're getting a veteran. You've got a guy that's played, multiple years at the Power Five level, played for Seth Luttrell back at North Texas, just a few years ago. He's a guy that comes in, and yes, it does further strengthen that bond between Oklahoma and the Roberts family with the the younger brother coming in 2025. You would have to think that does nothing but help Oklahoma's chances and being able to land Nate, next recruiting cycle. But Jake's a guy that can come in big, big size. Is probably not as polished as a pass catcher and as a route runner like what we're going to see from Bauer Sharp and Davin Mitchell. But he's a guy that's not afraid to get his nose bloodied up a little bit, line up there on the line of scrimmage, do the dirty work. I think he's going to be pivotal, this upcoming season for Oklahoma. And he's a good quality depth piece as well for Jackson Arnold to have at his disposal. Bauer Sharp is another guy, like you said, probably, I'm not going to say probably, he is the most athletic tight end that since we had Braden Willis a couple of years ago. Really good with the ball in his hands, making plays after the catch. He's a guy that you can line up probably primarily outside of the line of scrimmage. He can do some things with his hand in the dirt, but he's a guy that you're going to see Oklahoma maybe get back to the tight end position, doing some of the things like we saw with Mark Andrews, with Jermaine Gresham, with Grant Calcaterra, being guys that you can line up, just outside the hash and, be able to make some plays, create some mismatches, whether it's a linebacker or a safety. So curious to see what they're going to do with Bauer. And then, Davin Mitchell, I don't think that – I think that of all the kids outside of maybe David Stone, I think that Devon Mitchell has an opportunity to be the true freshman that's part of this class that can have the biggest impact on Oklahoma's football season next year. You look at the size, you look at the measurables, you look at some of the video guys like Parker Thune, put out from a week ago when he was out there competing in Florida at the All-American type camp. And, this is a guy that's going to come in. He's going to have to transform his body just a little bit. Jerry Schmidt will get that fixed within the first couple of months. I promise you that. But he's got all the tools that you want. He's a 5-tool player, if you want to use a baseball metaphor there. I think that he has all the physical tools in the world to be able to come in and be that next guy in what is a long lineage of, Oklahoma greats at the tight end position. So again, 3 really, really solid pieces to go along with what's already in that room in Oklahoma. So again, I think that where we sit right now, January 9th, 2024, compared to where we were a month ago, I think Oklahoma's tight end position room looks a lot better than it did just 4 weeks ago.
I meant Bauer Sharp, not Blake Bauer. So thank you on catching that there. I don't know where I got Blake Bauer from. I guess there's just so many Blakes in the tight end room, or who knows what.
Yeah, but well, Brock Bowers too. Who knows?
Brock, yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's probably what it was actually. Looking at the list of transfers that OU has so far, I think I want to say there's 11 of them at this point. There was 18 total last year, and I think OU's probably fairly close to wrapping up the numbers there. So we talked about Lance Hurd. I think obviously, like if OU gets him, the job's not his automatically, but he has the potential there to maybe have the biggest impact out of any of these transfers. We said, hey, that could be the crown jewel of a transfer class if he does indeed commit to OU.
No doubt.
I won't steal the next name here. I'll let you give this one if you want to, but who off the list of transfers right now do you think has the biggest impact?
Transfers that we already have in the boat that have committed to Oklahoma and are going to be on campus here pretty soon. Well, I think that the 2 big ones that stand out for me, I'm gonna stay away from the line of scrimmage here. Obviously, if Lance Hurd decides to bring his talents to Norman, Oklahoma, that's the clear cut number 1 on this list. Make no mistake about it. That's your starting left tackle going into next year, and then Spencer Brown and Jacob Sexton are probably going to be battling it out over the course of spring football and well into fall camp to lock up that right tackle position. But for me, the 2 guys that I think have an opportunity to play the biggest role, number 1, obviously, I think it's Deion Burks, the transfer wide receiver out of Purdue. You look at this kid's tape, his skill set, what he can do with his speed, his agility, his elusiveness. That's just another weapon. That's just another feather in the cap of Jackson Arnold. He's going to have a lot of fun, playing with his new toy that's going to be part of this Oklahoma offense next year. And then you want to flip it over to the other side of the football. I probably had this kid a little bit higher than I did, before Woody Washington announced his decision to come back for another season in Oklahoma. But I'm going to go with the Des Malone kid at the cornerback position. Transfer out of San Diego State. He's got the prototypical SEC corner type frame. 6'2", 200 plus pounds, can run like a deer, and is not afraid to get up and challenge you at the line of scrimmage. With his level of physicality. So I'm going to go Deion Burks, a wide receiver. Des Malone, I think, will have an opportunity to find his way, possibly being that third corner, the first corner off the bench in the rotation next year. So give me DB and give me Des Malone.
Des Malone, all, I guess, honorable mention, all Mountain West Conference there. So a nice piece out of a program that does have a defensive identity there in San Diego.
Sure.
So yeah, could certainly see that. I think there's certainly building a lot of depth across several different positions with this transfer class and the new guys that are coming in. So I like what I'm seeing there. Now we talked about, 18 transfers a year ago. We're sitting right there around that 11 number right now. It seems like we could probably add maybe one or two more guys along the offensive line. Outside of that, quarterback maybe. There's been some talk, some chatter out there on Twitter about Casey Thompson. I think, me personally, I would love to see that, but it sounds like this is kind of the number. Maybe we'll get up to like 14, 15, so it'll be a little bit less than last year. Do you think that's maybe a sign of better overall roster health going into year 3 of Brent Venables?
I think it's probably a better than 50-50 chance that there's another quarterback joining the fold that's going to be part of that room going into next season. And when you talk about the low number of commits, this cycle compared to the transfer portal, what it brought to Oklahoma a year ago in 18, I think that does, I think that does speak to the level of confidence that the coaches have in what they currently have in the building inside the Switzer Center. You talk about some guys that are, that made the decision to come back and play one final year at Oklahoma, the Stutzmans, the Bowmans, the Terrys of the world. And also combine that with the fact that, Brent Venables is coming off what's his third, top 8 recruiting class. And, that we talked about it, Adam, on last week's podcast, another top 10 class, that's nothing new at a place like Oklahoma. Bob did it, pretty much every single year over his tenure at Oklahoma. Lincoln Riley did it, but Lincoln did it in a different way. Whereas, most of the high ranking recruits that made up that top 10 class, that came from the quarterback and the wide receiver position. Whereas now with what Brent and this coaching staff is doing, they're spreading the talent out across all 22 positions on the football field. So you're starting to see a more balanced, more well-rounded recruiting class that Oklahoma continues to do. And, make no mistake about it, 2025 looks like it's going to be on a similar trajectory. But they've definitely got a lot of confidence in what they've got coming back. But I think that the 2024 class is going to be even more impactful than a lot of people really think that it is. And I do, Adam. I think that there will be 3, maybe upwards of 5 to 6 guys that could see their way onto the field next year. They're going to be coming in from the 2024 class. Now, I'm not saying they're going to be starters or anything like that, but again, some of these guys at key positions of need for Oklahoma that, yes, we've already got some good players at those positions, but the best problem that you can have as a coach is you continue to recruit guys that have a much higher ceiling than what you currently have on your roster. And make no mistake about it, they're doing that at some of these positions on their football team. So they're very confident what they've got inside the Switzer Center, but they're also very confident and very excited about what this 2024 class is going to bring to the table.
Will probably be a big talking point that we'll maybe get tired of throughout the season. I guess, you know what? We probably won't get tired of this throughout the offseason. 9, 10 starters coming back on defense, depending on how you view certain positions there. But really, I think you look at the 2024 class plus the transfer portal commits coming in, outside of the offensive line, all those guys are going to be battling to unseat someone who's maybe an incumbent there. So I think you look at that and go, okay, we don't have to rely on like PJ and Peyton to be big names like we did last year. We don't have to hope for, hey, this portal player needs to be a hit. We have somebody that's at least somewhat proven in most positions across the roster there. So if they do unseat someone, that's probably a great thing. It means we nailed it. We got a star either in high school or coming out of the portal there.
Well, Adam, I mean, let's take a step back here, because who would have thought 2 years ago we would actually be having this conversation? just look at Oklahoma on the defensive side of the football, starting with the safety group: Peyton Bowen, Billy Bowman, RSJ. You go over to corner: Gentry, Woody, Makari Vickers, Des Malone. And then at the linebacker position, Stutz coming back for another year. Kip
It's
Lewis.
so stacked.
It's so stacked. There's that quality competitive depth that we're seeing, not just at one position on defense, but you're seeing it across the board at all three levels of the defense. And that's not something that we've, grown. That's not something that we've seen in Oklahoma since what? Maybe the, 2012, 2014 era. I guess you could probably make that claim in 2015 where you had, Charles Tapper, you had Stryker, you had Zach Sanchez, you had a star at all three levels of that defense. Well, now there's guys, Adam, that have the opportunity not to be just playmakers, but have an opportunity to grow into, solid, productive football players that can be impact guys rather than just guys out there fielding, one of 11 spots on defense. So again, I'm really excited about the makeup of this team. And Adam, I want to circle this back here. We'll put a bow on it. The offensive line going into next season, that is the biggest question mark about this football team. Make no mistake about it. Call a spade what it is. Call a spade a spade. But if Oklahoma can go out there, you land the commitment from a Lance Hurd, then I'm sorry, but that's group that has the opportunity to be the biggest impact on a position group, I think, on this entire football team. Because if you can bring in a guy like Lance Hurd, then I think that with what is currently in Norman, with a couple of the other guys that are coming in from the portal, Bill Beanball, you got to give the man credit where credit's due. He will find a way, whether it's super glue, duct tape, spit, gum, he will figure out a way to put 5 really good guys out there and play, good, successful football. But make no mistake about it, Lance Hurd, that is the straw that kind of stirs the drink right now when you try to project how good this offensive line could potentially be going into next season. If you landing great, then that changes, I think, expectations a little bit for this Oklahoma football team going into next year. If not, then we're just going to kind of hold our breath and see how the first 3 to 4 weeks of the season looks like. And we're going to have all off season to talk about it. It's going to be a lot of fun. But yeah, it's going to be fun times. Hopefully they get this kid.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. On the interior of the offensive line, I think there's plenty of options. So like if one guy doesn't work, you have a different choice there. At tackle, I feel like right now we have 2 options. And we're still wondering if how good Spencer Brown. He started a lot of games at Michigan State, so he's got tons of experience. Is he good enough to play at OU though? And so when you add Zalance Hurd into that equation, one, he's pushing Spencer Brown, he's pushing Jacob Sexton to get better. Mm-hmm. So if one of those 3 guys A gets hurt or B just doesn't develop or isn't OU good enough, you have options there. And depth becomes so much more important when you talk about the way the playoff is going to be, where not only do you have to play and win 2 games, you got to win 3 games, 4 games to win a national championship. And that's what we aspire to do here at Oklahoma is win national championships. So building up that depth continually across the board, across all positions. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and in the comments section, James making a couple of really good points. He said, I think we've played 11 true freshmen each of the last 2 seasons. That goes back to, the evaluations with Brent Venables and, finding guys, raising the level of talent with some of these high school kids coming into the program. And he says, safety is so stacked, Key Lawrence left the program for Ole Miss. Yeah, I don't see anything wrong with that.
I think that kind of says it all. Time to talk basketball, right? Because we didn't spend a whole lot of time last week, and they really deserved their due. So I think it's time to chat a little bit about how Oklahoma is faring in Big 12 play as they get things kicked off with a win over the Cyclones of Iowa State. We've got the highlights running for those watching on Twitter and YouTube in the background here. But Tyler, what's your initial impressions as OU? I always want to say kicks off Big 12 play, but in basketball, I guess they tip off Big 12 play. Mm-hmm.
It's just the level of athleticism within this basketball team. 5 to, I guess they play about an 8-man rotation. It's just the level of athleticism that this basketball team, with what Porter Moser, we just talked about Brent Venables transforming this roster. The same can be said for what Porter's done down at the LNC. This basketball team is a hell of a lot of fun to watch. They're athletic. They get out on the perimeter. They make plays, in transition, fast break. And, Adam, I keep talking about it every single episode. On nights where this team is able to shoot probably 35 to 40% from beyond the arc, this team can play with anybody in America. We talked about the game in the group chat against Iowa State. That's a game, Adam, that a year ago or maybe the last 2 seasons, Oklahoma finds a way to lose that game. Competitive, 1 to 2 possession game within the last, 4 to 5 minutes. Oklahoma lost those games time and time again in the Big 12. And like I said, maybe they've turned the corner. Maybe this is just, kind of fool's gold within game one. But they found a way to knock off Iowa State, defend home court. The LNC atmosphere was, you couldn't have asked for a much better of an atmosphere, especially with the students still out on vacation, not coming back yet from the Christmas break. And Adam, that Iowa State win in the LNC on Saturday, that looks a whole lot better when you look at what just happened a few moments ago with Iowa State in Ames knocking off the number 2 Cougars of Houston tonight. So again, really impressive win at the LNC, and now you're ranked number 9 in the country. You're 13-1 going into what's going to be your first true road game, and you've got a couple really tough ones back-to-back here this week, starting tomorrow night, 8 p.m. tip-off in Fort Worth against TCU, a team that, took Kansas all the way down to the wire, lost by 2 points inside the Fog on Saturday, and, due to another late game beneficial call in favor of the Jayhawks.
Got to beat what? Is there 3 refs? So you got to beat 8 players on the other team.
Yeah, you got to beat 8 players on the other team. It's amazing how that happens time and time again. Teams going to Lawrence, and they always seem to figure out a way to close it out at the very end. But make no mistake about it, I think that this is the week where if Oklahoma can figure out a way to get a split, if you can go 1-1 in Fort Worth,
that would be amazing.
That would be amazing. You're 2-1 coming back home. You've got some good momentum, but you've also got some good confidence. Nobody expects this team to go into Lawrence on Saturday and knock off Kansas. Oklahoma hasn't won in Lawrence since we've been alive? I mean,
not since I've been alive. I'm
Buddy's
30.
teams didn't do it. Trey didn't do it. So nobody expects, much of this Oklahoma basketball team going to Lawrence on Saturday. But if you can go 1-1, split this 2-game series this week, then I think that you're in a really good position coming back home for the way that the rest of this Big 12 schedule forecast for Oklahoma. But it's going to be tough, Adam. The Big 12, it's the toughest basketball league in America. We say it year in and year out. 6 teams currently in the top 25, 3 in the top 10, one of which is Oklahoma. It's here, man. The meat and potatoes of the schedule's here. Let's get it going.
Yeah, I like the way that this team, it was not at all like a clean or perfect game. It was a little bit ugly to watch against Iowa State, and that's kind of the nature of Big 12 play getting a little bit tougher. There's going to be better scouting reports because a guy like JV McCollum, there's half a season of data and tape on him at this point. So how teams are going to try to defend and shut him down and shut other guys down on this team. So I think you really like what you see of what they did this past Saturday of saying, hey, things weren't always going perfectly, but they led throughout most of the game. And then when crunch time came into play, they pulled away from that Cyclones team who just got a really solid win. Like you mentioned there, I think Purple Orca in the chat, shout out to them for pointing out that Houston was the win that they took them down just recently. So as far as this team is constructed, I definitely want to see them continue to evolve and continue to get stronger as Big 12 play goes on. I know a lot of people will probably listen to this podcast or watch this YouTube video later on after that TCU game has already taken place. If OU loses that game, yeah, ideally you would like that 1-1 split like you talked about. But if they don't win that game, that's fine. You kind of expect to lose some on the road in the Big 12 play, but you got to pick off some teams when you can. TCU is a team that is very good. They're going to be challenging for OU. Fort Worth is not always the toughest place to play, though. Lincoln the dog making an appearance on the show again.
Amazon driver.
Amazon, always going late. But this is an opportunity for you. Students not in town in Fort Worth. School hasn't started up. So here's your opportunity to go pick off a TCU team that maybe felt like they should have won in Lawrence, and maybe they're thinking about that game too much. So I kind of think, though, one player I'm keeping my eye on over the next couple of games is Jalen Moore. He plays the 4 for OU. He only had 17 minutes, got in foul trouble against Iowa State. But he's a guy that can defend any position on the floor, provides a little bit of a dynamic offensive player with his almost elasticity is the way he kind of plays. He's got so much bounce, and he hasn't taken a lot of 3-pointers, but he has hit over 40% on the year so far. So I want to see him continue to evolve and become a guy that, I don't want to call him glue, because I feel like I feel like his ceiling is higher than that. I think he can be a dynamic player that can give other teams some challenges that can help take attention away from Owe or Uzan or McCollum, so that's harder to game plan for this team, and that way they can get stronger as the year goes on.
Well, Adam, I think that this is the first time, realistically, since Porter Mosier's been here, that he's got more than just one guy on his basketball team that can beat you, that can, be the guy that can be the difference maker on any given night, especially in the Big 12. And we'll see how that goes. But, this is a basketball team that's got the depth, that has the talent across all five positions, that you don't have to rely on Javion McCollum, to his performance on any given night. That makes or breaks you. That's the difference between you winning or losing. Now, it definitely goes a long way in helping you, but this is a deep basketball team that's getting, good quality performances from guys up and down the roster. You talk about Sam Godwin was kind of the unsung hero. He was fantastic in the closing stretch against Iowa State, ultimately propelling the Sooners to a win to kick off Big 12 play. But you've got Javion McCollum, you've got Jalen Moore, you've got Otega Owe. It's I guess the biggest word that I have to describe this basketball team that we left off, Adam, is it almost kind of feels like they're scrappy. They've got the ability. They can figure out a way. They can get down on the floor. They scramble for loose balls. They win the 50-50 balls. They're not afraid to make those, the plays that don't show up in the stat sheet. This team is making those this year, whereas, we haven't really seen that from each of the last couple of seasons. So we'll see how that translates into the Big 12. I'm trying to kind of tamper my expectations a little bit, because we've seen this from Oklahoma basketball before over the years, where they have a good, somewhat successful, maybe not a 13-1 type start that Oklahoma has so far this year, but once they turn the corner, they flip the page and they get into Big 12 play, then they really kind of start going downhill a little bit. But for this basketball team going forward, hold serve at home, figure out a way to win those games against against some of those teams that you're supposed to beat. Find a way to beat them in their building, and then maybe you try to pick off a Kansas or a BYU or maybe even a Houston. Find out a way to win one or two of those games that you're not supposed to win, because that's only going to strengthen your resume, and that's only going to go further. And, basically you trying to get the highest possible seed when it comes time to March Madness.
Joe Lunardi has the Sooners as a number 4 seed in the same bracket as the number 1 overall seed Purdue. So you would like to see OU potentially improve that, so they don't have to play a Boilermakers in a Sweet 16 scenario. Of course, you got to win your first 2 games to get there. But I do think that I like the word scrappy in describing this team, but also at the same time, I think that they've shown some flashes in moments and in certain games of being even better than that. You've seen them, and there was moments in the Iowa State game. I think back to the Iowa game as well, where OU just kind of held, what is a power conference team kind of at arm's distance and in a little bit of a dominant fashion. So if they can develop some of that consistency and say, hey, like K-State, when we go and play in Bramlage in the octagon up there, you're not going to be able to game plan around Javion McCollum because we've got Miles Uzan or Otega Owe. And we kind of saw a little bit of that in the Lloyd Noble Center this past Saturday because Owe was in foul trouble. I thought Uzan stepped up nicely. I thought McCollum was his regular self. So I thought you saw some different guys step up there, but it's about finding that consistency, especially on a team that we do have some question marks around what are they going to be like in late February and March. Because I don't think there's a single guy on this team that has played in a March Madness game. So the experience just really isn't there. It doesn't mean they can't still go a long way and make a big mark, but it's something that's a little bit of an unknown still.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I don't think that when you start the year off 13-1, I don't want to all of a sudden, move the goalpost. Let's reset, expectations for Oklahoma. But we said it, Adam, going into this season that it was basically your expectation was, and there's no excuse for it, find out a way to make the NCAA tournament. This isn't something that Porter Moser's been able to do with this basketball program each of the first couple of seasons that he's been in Norman. He's got the roster. He's got the talent to be able to do so. You've been able to build up a pretty damn good resume over the course of non-conference play. You're already 1-0 in Big 12. Let's figure out a way to capitalize on this positive start. Let's put together a nice run to start off Big 12 play. And let's essentially get ourselves into a position where we lock up a spot in the Big 12 champion or in the March Madness tournament. And we're not spending, the last 2 weeks of the season looking at the first in, last 4 out, trying to figure out a way, okay, Big 12 scenarios, how does Oklahoma strengthen their resume to where they can sneak into the tournament? No, Oklahoma's done everything that they've been expected to do. Let's continue this positive momentum going on the road this season, going on the road this week in Lawrence, in Fort Worth. Let's figure out a way to win a couple of basketball games.
As it stands today, we are about 1 month out from Patty and the girls taking the field there for softball. I always want to say kicking off. There I go again, but they don't kick off in softball. So we will have a preview show for softball. We will have a preview show for baseball as they hit the diamond as well. Both teams went to the postseason. Obviously, the women's team won the World Series, and baseball, I thought, had a really strong outing after making it to Omaha and not having a lot of the same pieces that were on that team that made that run, but still finding a way to get into the postseason for college baseball. So I think there's a lot to be excited about for both teams, obviously, and we'll have some more discussion coming on that in the coming weeks here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've got Patty Gasso's team going for, a program record 4th straight national championship. This team is just simply in a league of its own right now with what they're doing out there on the diamond. And Adam, the spring sports, once you got done with basketball, softball was always the team that kind of took the cake. They took the spotlight away from baseball. And with what Skip Johnson and this baseball staff has done each of the last couple of seasons, the spotlight is back on L. Mitchell Park. I know a lot of fans, I know that we're fired up about what's going to be going on, both at the brand new softball stadium, but also L. Mitchell Park. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch these two Diamond Sports teams go at it this season, their last season before we join the SEC. Adam, there's a couple of comments that we've seen here, both on Twitter and in the YouTube comments. People are asking about our thoughts on Ted Roof and the Zach Alley hire. We're going to save a lot of our comments and analysis for the Zach Alley hire once it actually becomes official and it's announced by the university. Hopefully we're discussing that next week. But Adam, just any quick thoughts on Ted Roof? We can discuss that. That is official. Ted Roof no longer defensive coordinator in Norman. Brent's choosing to go a different direction.
I think it's one thing that, just like Dylan Gabriel leaving to go to Oregon, that will be completely misinterpreted by people outside of the OU fan base, because it's not necessarily a firing in the sense of when he came to Norman 2 years ago, this was kind of a part of the plan. Same thing with Dylan Gabriel. We kind of knew that there was going to be a time, there was a temporary Band-Aid solution in a sense to get things off the ground. And
same thing with Thad Turnipseed as well.
I don't know if I would agree with you completely on that one. I think things changed with NIL in a different direction there, so it just didn't make sense. But I view it more of the sense of we have our footing now. We were in a bad place after Lincoln Riley left because of the way he constructed the roster, the way he took so many players with him. Just in the general sense of not necessarily anything bad he did, but in the sense that anytime a coach leaves the program nowadays, total roster overhaul, and if you miss on the portal players, then you're kind of in a bad spot. So I kind of look at this as hey, this was the Band-Aid solution. Now that we're on our feet, we're moving forward into the new era of hopefully a lot of prosperity with OU football, and we're doing that with a 5-star quarterback and basically a young mini Brent Venables, in a sense that a guy that really understands this defense, understands what Brent's vision is, and can go execute that, and then be creative on top of that of being a young bright mind in the defensive space potentially coming in there. So yeah, I'm excited about it.
Yeah, I know that the public opinion, probably for each of the last 2 seasons, thought that Oklahoma wasn't truly maximizing the defensive coordinator position. Ultimately a lot
especially
of us,
from a recruiting side,
ourselves especially, we were questioning the hire when it was made. Why would Brent Venables, arguably, the best defensive mind in college football, why would you bring in Ted Roof to come in and run the show on defense, which again, we've seen how it's played out over the last 24 months. Brent was the one in charge of the defense, but you still got to give credit where credit's due. And I think a lot of praise and, applause does need to be thrown in the direction of Ted Roof, because he's a guy that came in, assisted in getting Oklahoma back up off of the mat in terms of their play on defense, setting Oklahoma on that positive trajectory that the Sooners find themselves on right now. So you got to give Ted a lot of credit, but at the same time too, in the back of your mind, you're always asking yourself, are we getting the most out of what we currently have in that role? And I don't think that's something that Oklahoma can realistically sit here and say that they were maximizing that position. Whether you want to talk recruiting trail, whether you want to talk about the ability to develop guys, I think that the best part for me, and we'll touch on Zach Alley a little bit more when it's made official, but the funny part about that potential hire, Adam, is if you blindfolded me and you just told me to listen to a clip of Zach Alley, whether it's in the interview room, whether it's on the field coaching his guys, if you would have just told me that this is a 29-year-old coach out there on the practice field, I would have told you just by the way that this guy talks, the way his mannerisms, the way he acts and how he speaks, I would have thought that was a 29-year-old Brent Venables that was, up in Manhattan, Kansas, or brand new as the defensive coordinator in Oklahoma. So there's a lot to be excited about with the Zach Alley hire. We'll touch on it more next week. Hopefully it becomes official. But I think that this is a position on the coaching staff that Oklahoma saw a need for an upgrade, saw a need for a change in direction. And I think that a brand new face, especially a younger, more energetic face, I think that's going to pay dividends for Oklahoma as we go into the SEC.
Oh, you didn't have to recruit too many linebackers this season because there was so much depth already in the room. But I think we'll see that on the recruiting trail. That energy, I think could be a difference maker for some of those elite guys that we really need in that room. After guys like Danny Stutzman go pro, so.
Yeah, and I know he's at Jacksonville State, but I mean, it's obviously there's going to be a huge learning curve being, recruiting guys to Oklahoma as opposed to Jacksonville State. You're not recruiting the same caliber of athlete, but the best thing about it for me, Adam, is look what part of the country he's been recruiting in over the past few seasons. That's SEC territory through and through. That's just another guy that's got the relationships, that's got the track record in that part of the country, and I think it's going to be a good win for Oklahoma.
Absolutely. That's going to do it for us this evening here at the Main Line. We appreciate everyone who has listened along on the podcast if you're listening later, and especially those of you who joined us on the live show on YouTube and on Twitter. So we appreciate everyone, and we will see you next week for the next episode of the Main Line.